Thank you very much. I think you'd be lucky to get your new agenda on May the 8th, I have to tell you. Sometime after, maybe. And also, just for the record, we still have 3 reports to agree before the House rises. One on jobs and livelihoods, one on the annual report, and one on Nepal. So it's got a busy couple of weeks ahead. But perhaps that picks up one of the points, which is that we, I think, accept that the agenda towards the private sector has had to move and had to change. But I think the starting point on that one, and if I just pick that one up first, seems to me and to us, is that we all know that those countries that successfully lift their people out of poverty do so because they have a dynamic and expanding private sector. The question you have to ask is, what is the role of donors in helping to make that happen? And you can have a debate, and perhaps traditional debate was, well, we'll deliver education and health and infrastructure, and then the private sector will come in. But you have problems with governance, you have problems with corruption, you have other shortcomings. And in the end, there has to be a dialogue which says to the potential investors, whether they're domestic or external to any developing country, what is it that we as donors can usefully do that might make a difference, might help you to do something which would be in your interest but you might not otherwise do, or do more of it, or do it faster. And when we do produce our jobs and livelihoods report, we will certainly identify that there are some good things that DFID is doing in that area that have precisely delivered that. We do have questions, I think, about the private sector programme of £1.8 billion, for which we don't have enough information as to exactly what combination of things will be there and whether there is enough of them to deliver that transformational outcome. And it certainly isn't the job of the donors to prop up the profits of the private sector. But if I give you a couple of examples, I saw small, medium scale when we were looking at that in Tanzania. One was to do with solar panels for poor families, and the other was to do actually extending fertilizer and seed distribution. They were both commercial organisations which were in the game for their own profit. What the partnership did, in the case of the solar panels, was enable them to reach more people faster than they would have done from their own resources, and with the commitment that they would repay some of the money when they had achieved that. And similarly with the seed and distribution, it was a company operating commercially to sell seeds and fertilizers to farmers. But what the extra money did was persuaded them to reach remoter areas and smaller farmers than they would otherwise have done. They took some persuading, and again, they undertook that at the end of the programme, first of all, they require no further support, and that they would repay at least some of the money that had gone there. So the point about those things is they were relatively small amounts of money. So 1.8 billion requires an awful lot of those things, I think. So we have questions about not the desirability, but whether it's actually achievable on that scale. I think we also did an earlier report, which was the Future of Development Finance, which is alluded to in the DAC report, where we said that as the world changes, the basic concentration on simply delivering grants needs to become more flexible. Obviously, if you're working with the private sector, returnable capital. This is a personal view because I know the Secretary of State hasn't yet shared it, and the committee was sort of open-minded about it, but I think you can use returnable capital in the public sector if it helps, say, a provincial government in India, with my thoughts, achieve a poverty reduction programme on a scale and a speed that their own resources wouldn't do. And you could effectively put money up front, which would enable them to do something at the beginning for a 10-year programme that would otherwise take 10 years for them to build up to. Those seem to me to be the areas where you could have slightly more creative finance, subject to not obviously adding to indebtedness. There need to be those sort of safeguards. Taking the point about an overall vision, I mean, I think obviously we've been through the post-millennium, the 2015 process, which has given everybody some opportunity to think about it. So it'd be a little unfair to say there's been no input, given that our Prime Minister chaired the panel. But nevertheless, I do actually think that needs to be pulled back to the UK to say, what is it we're trying to do? And again, I think understandably, we've focused up until now on delivering the 0.7%, and that was a really big political prize to fight for and to get the consensus for. Now we've got it. I hope we'll keep it. I hope we'll pass it into law for what that's worth. But frankly, it's the political will that matters much more than whether it's law or not. Not that I'm against that. I think it's a good idea. But I think if we're going to maintain it, we've got to decide what is the UK contribution? That may be what is our USP, what have we got to add value to, and what can we leave better to others? And how should we do it? In other words, what should we do that's better done in our partner countries? What have it done with the big institutions? There's a particular point saying that we're not coherent enough about our engagement with the EU compared with our engagement with the World Bank. Now, there may be good reasons for that. There are other different institutions for dealing with, but it's a perfectly fair question, it seems to me, that, which, again, the committee has asked, how we can, if you like, ensure that that delivers the outcomes that we would like. We've also identified the need for more cross-government policy coherence. And again, there are instruments like the National Security Council which have helped that, and there are things like the conflict pool and its successor, and indeed just the experience in Sierra Leone where cooperation between DFID and the Department for Health, the MOD and the Foreign Office have all come together, at least all of those, and the Home Office too, I think, to create a cross-government approach and draw on resources. But that could be done more systematically, we think, and thought through more systematically, and that's one of the suggestions we've made, and there should be more thought, and more challenge really to other government departments. And in fact, if I just go back to my earlier point, if we are recognising that we can do more to stimulate private sector development, maybe we should work more closely, DFID should work more closely with BIS. We should actually even think about whether it can be joint with the Department for Business and Innovation and Skills to see whether or not this cross-fertilisation of ideas. And the other thing, we obviously are saying that absolutely agree that there is a danger when you're a big player and you do have all this intellectual drive, you can occasionally give the impression of arrogance, and I've certainly had that feedback on occasion, although it's always qualified, to be fair, that actually you've got a lot to be arrogant about and you have an awful lot of leadership, but just occasionally you might just think that you can got it right and that other people can do it differently and you need to learn. And I kind of think it is learning when it's being helpful in doing that, on that process sometimes. It's almost like the king's got no clothes. Asking the daft question sometimes gets you an intelligent answer. And then the final point is, if all this dynamic change is required, which it probably is, you do need an overarching vision so that people understand what this is all for, and you need to ensure that your staff capabilities match what you're trying to do, both the ones you have in-house and the ones you partner with. So that's a pretty challenging environment for Mark to work in, I have to say. I appreciate that. But on the other hand, quite an exciting one too. So I think our view is that we have set as a world a vision in 15 years to eradicate poverty, to leave no one behind. There's no doubt at all that 0.7% by everybody is needed to do that, and we should be pushing other countries to do the same and show the same. Purchasing global goods, such we've done on health, benefits everybody. Security benefits everybody. Influencing migration benefits everybody. So it's a completely absurd final point to make that 0.7% is far too much of our national wealth to be invested in this area, and charity should be given at home. Well, I couldn't agree less. It seems to me what we do at that level can be transformational. It is the right thing to do, and it's not measured on immediate returns, but I absolutely firmly believe that it does Britain's standing in the world and our long-term prospects in the world a huge amount of good, and in that sense it's worth every penny, whilst not accepting that not every penny is well spent.
Thank you very much, Sir Malcolm.